everybody! Welcome back to my channel at Invest Naturally. So as many of you know, I like to volunteer a lot. And a lot of the volunteering I do is around reducing the waste in our environment. And one of those ways is compost, whether that be in vermicompost, hot composting, or cold composting. They all go back into the soil. So let's get on to the video.
This class was in continuation to the Living Earth tour. Once we got off the bus, we then walked towards the community garden at the Kirby Creek facility. Now this garden is not open to the public. It is solely a demonstration garden to help teach the residents of the city all about gardening. But like all the other community gardens, they also have a composting bin area. These compost bins, which are called shepherd's bins, are 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet cubic yards. The reason why this is important is because stores that sell gardening and landscaping materials such as mulch and soil, including living earth, sell their product by the cubic yard. The instructor then demonstrated how to efficiently turn the compost pile. She simply removed the shepherd's bin, moved it into a new location, and that is when you will then pick up the compost pile and turn it over into the new location of the bin. After the instructor had finished demonstrating how a compost bin works and looks, she then had us start digging for small critters and put them into this bucket. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to record the first activity we did with the compost that we just collected from outside. That activity involved us putting it on a plate like I'm doing right here, but instead of putting it back into this cup, we examined the compost with a magnifying glass to see the critters that we were talking about previously. So this activity that I'm showing you right now is perfect for young children to do to help them learn and educate them on how composting works without having to go outside. You're going to need 3 cups, 3 different types of food waste, and a plate. The food waste that we used were a banana slice, a piece of banana peel, and a piece of watermelon rind. And what you see me doing right now is an extra step. So basically I added the compost first and then the food waste, but because I wanted to avoid molding and attracting flies, I ended up dumping out my compost and food waste so that I could put the food waste at the very bottom and the compost on top. Now you see that I have stacked up my cups. This is solely for transportation purposes and to reduce the amount of saran wrap I'm using because I like to avoid using as much single waste as possible. And then you'll see me go grab a rubber band, and this is just to secure it more tightly so it doesn't spill in my vehicle while I am traveling back home. After we were done with these kid-friendly activities, we then reviewed a PowerPoint. As you can see in the background, there is a PowerPoint presentation. Once the instructor had finished telling us about the different types of composting methods, she then brought out this glass scale model to help us see how to build this composting method that she is about to demonstrate. It's a lasagna style compost. So what you will need are your browns, which is carbon, and your greens, which is your nitrogen. The carbon that we are using are dried up leaves. So you'll need to make a layer of your carbon, a nice big layer. You'll always add more carbon than you do your nitrogen. You will notice that the instructor is starting to break down the leaves into smaller pieces. The reason for that is because your compost pile will break down quicker if the material put in are in smaller pieces. For instance, if you were to put in a dried up log into your compost pile versus sawdust and checked up on that pile a month later, the log will still look like the log, but the sawdust you won't be able to tell what it was. Don't forget to water your pile. After each layer, you want to add a little bit of water to keep it moist. Now we're going to add our greens. The greens we are using in this demonstration are grass trimmings. Don't forget to add water on this layer as well. You don't want to add as much as nitrogen does have a lot of liquid in it already. As you can probably tell, Why this is called the lasagna method is because we are layering. Just like in a lasagna recipe, you have your sauce, your meat, your cheese, and the pasta. So every layer, you'll have your carbon, your nitrogen, and your water. Always make sure that you add more carbon than you do nitrogen. This will help alleviate the smell. If your compost pile does start to smell, it's probably because you have way too much nitrogen compared to your carbon. You will also want to make this pile very high because if you've never made a compost pile, this pile will significantly decrease as the compost pile breaks down. Now that we have seen what a real compost pile looks like, learned about the compost and the different methods there are to it, and build a compost pile in a demonstration scale, we are now going to learn how to build a homemade compost bin. Bins can be made of anything as long as air is able to flow through it. Or if you like, you don't have to have a bin and you can just have a pile of compost in your backyard. You will notice we are now outside. This is so that we can have more room to work in groups of 4. Each group will work on one panel of the compost bin. Everyone working on this project needed to grab a pair of gloves. Each group needed 4 PVC elbows, scissors, 28 zip ties, chicken wire, a rubber mallet, and PVC pipe. Each PVC pipe should be 36 inches long. Take your PVC pipes and connect them with the PVC elbows. Then use your rubber mallet to secure them in place. Once they have been secured in place, grab your chicken wire. From there, you will attach the chicken wire alongside of the PVC pipes with zip ties. Each side of the panel should have 7 zip ties, totaling 28 zip ties per panel, as you can see here. Then with your scissors, you will cut down the zip ties so that the long strand isn't in the way. Once all the groups were done making their panels, we then set them aside and started learning about vermicomposting. If you don't know what vermicomposting is, full warning, it is worms doing the composting for you. These particular worms are red regulars. If you don't like worms, this composting method may not be for you. So after we learned about our little red regulars and what to feed them and what not to feed them, we then went back outside where the instructor had a few containers that she was able to demonstrate to us what are some different options you can put your red regulars in. A few of the same characteristics all of these containers show are that they all are opaque, they are not transparent because the worms do not like sunlight. They like to be in dark places. The other thing is all of these containers have holes in them, but they're all very small holes. Some of the containers she does show have larger holes, and the red regulars could potentially escape. Now, the red regulars usually don't escape as long as they like the environment, but if they do not like the environment, they will try to escape. So make sure you have tiny holes. You don't want to suffocate your red regulars. You want to make sure that oxygen is getting to them as they do breathe. Now, some of the different characteristics of these containers are their shapes and sizes, as well as some of the containers have holes on the bottom to help drain excess liquid from the container. Now, you don't need to drill holes at the bottom if you don't want to double up on bins, if you just want one bin. Now for the fun part, we're going to create our own vermicompost bins. At the event, they gave us our own bins and handed out newspapers. We then started to shred the newspapers into smaller pieces. The newspapers will act as the bedding for the worms. Once you have finished shredding your newspaper, grab a bottle of water and start spraying down the newspaper. You do not want the newspaper to be soaking wet, but you do want it to be damp enough. When you grab it and squeeze the newspaper, small drops of water come out. Once I was satisfied with the dampness of my newspaper, I then grabbed my bin to go get my worms. For the people that were a little squeamish about touching worms, the instructor helped fill up their bucket. But for myself, after dealing with my vermicompost bin for about a few months, I have found to actually enjoy my little red wigglers. After I finished collecting my worms, I then went to grab some food waste to help feed my worms. the same concept of breaking down the leaves, I then started to shred down the food waste because the red wiggers have tiny mouths. Now you'll see that I am covering up the food waste and my worms with the bedding. You may notice there isn't a lot of bedding, and that's because there isn't. Once I get home, I will add more newspaper shreds, but as of right now, that is all they had to provide. And that's all you need to make a vermicompost bin. And that was the end of the 101 composting class. Now, for the ones that attended at the very beginning at the Living Earth tour, they had a fun raffle for us and they gifted us these awesome composting t-shirts.
I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!